cheek, got the gravy on the rice. Rolling in Mexico.
Welcome back to another episode of the Steelers Fit. Oh, sorry, this isn't the Steelers Fix. It's the Steelers Q&A podcast here on the Steel Curtain Network. We're live here on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter from Steel Curtain Network and Fans First Sports. And you can also follow along live on my X account as well at the Bets93, THEBETZ93. We're going to dive into Steelers training camp. We're going to talk about all sorts of different things. And to do that with me tonight, I've got Archie Wilson. Archie is joining me. Typically been filling in for Andrew Wilbar on the Draft Dynasty podcast in recent weeks. But Archie, wanted to get you on the Steelers Q&A because we don't talk much Steelers actually on the Draft Dynasty show. It's kind of more all NFL encompassing. But you're a Steelers fan, so wanted to get you on to talk some Pittsburgh Steelers more directly here.
Yeah, no, definitely looking forward to it. It has been tough over the last few weeks, not to mention the likes of Caleb Johnson all the time. But
Yeah.
yeah, so now we can do that, and looking forward to it, Bets.
Yeah, man, absolutely, and always good to talk with you. I think, for the basic start up here of the show, and we're gonna get to the chat and the questions and everything from listeners. So listeners, get those questions in. Looks like we've got some of the regulars already in the chat. Appreciate you guys. It's much harder to see who's in the chat, just so you guys are aware with this new uh, session that we're using, this new software that we're using for our live streams. So I apologize if I do not get some of the names right and everything as we're going through, but it does look like we've got a lot of the regulars in already, and so keep it coming. And give us your questions. I'm sure there are plenty of questions about training camp, and kind of the title of this show and the thought that I wanted to spring things with here, Archie, is that a lot of the questions that we had to start training camp are kind of still our questions. I mean, uh, the offense versus the defense, right? The defense has kind of been winning those matchups with regularity, so we don't necessarily have a good idea is if this offense is coming together and growing together and improving in this system and as a unit. It's hard to gauge that, right? Because the defense has been kind of lights out through training camp, which is kind of to be expected. But then also like uh, the offensive line, how good is it? It is this pass rush just so good? I mean, Broderick Jones has been struggling. He's been hurt, and we haven't seen him on the field that much. Um, and then just some of the other questions, like the wide receiver room. What's going on there behind DK Metcalf? So a lot of the questions that we had are kind of still the questions. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think coming into the training camp, majority of the questions were going to be surrounding the Steelers' offense. There were a few questions about the defense in terms of how the secondary would look with Jalen Ramsey and Darius Slay having their first camp with the Steelers. But aside from that, continuity really remained a key factor for the Steelers' defense. So I think you pretty much bang on there that most of the questions will be surrounding those specific offensive groups, positional groups, quarterback. How does Aaron Rodgers look? On the offensive line, how does the first kind of year of this whole rebuild kind of collectively being together look against the Steelers defense? And then, yeah, wide receiver, it's been a question ever since George Pickens got traded. So that's always going to keep being prominent in the storylines.
It is, and we've had a couple questions already. Just as an aside here, that about Alex Highsmith, was he hurt today? It does sound like he had a groin injury. I think Mike Tomlin mentioned he has a groin injury, and we'll be watching that. Um, the uh, the overall thought, though, it kind of seemed like was that he'd be fine. Just maybe needs some maintenance time. So that's good. I just think that moving back towards um, the offense right now and kind of the question marks there, clarity on it might not come in the form of training camp practices. We might have to wait for preseason games, right? We might have to see what preseason looks like, and we might even have to wait until the regular season, a few games in,
Yeah,
to see what this looks like before things get rolling.
yeah, absolutely. I think with NFL, most NFL teams, you're going to see the offense does take a lot longer to get their timing and rhythm together as a unit, and especially when you've had a lot of turnover in key positions like the Steelers have had in this off season. I think it would be almost unfair to completely write off the Steelers offense based off training camp reports. And I think
Yep.
the fact that they're also coming up against a defense that, from a Steelers Nation perspective, we expect them to be a top five, top three unit across the board. So I think they've got a tough challenge to start with, coming up against the likes of TJ Watt, Jalen Ramsey, Cam Hayward, and the rest of the depth along the defense. So I think even through preseason, you might see some struggles. Obviously, you're not going to see the starters too much as well. So I think you're right in saying that maybe through a few weeks of the actual regular season is where we'll see how the Steelers' offense is really looking.
Yeah, that's it, it's going to take time. We were always saying it was going to take time to see, probably even see them come together and gel as a group in a winning way, and not to say that they can't win early in the season because they have this defense and because they might be able to manufacture just enough on offense to figure it out. But um, there's a world where it takes a few weeks, and that's nothing new. It's fine. It's going to take that time, and we just need to be prepared as a group for it. But training camp, practices, that this is all about the team development behind the scenes, and yeah, we get to see it on the field a little bit here, but I don't put much stock into training camp reports outside of injuries, and outside of like some of the one-on-ones are a little more intriguing, and that's where to me I find some hope in the situation on the offense. And again, to say, I take everything with a grain of salt here, but when you listen to some of the reports of the one on ones, guys like DK Metcalf are winning a lot of those reps.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Broderick Jones actually had a good day on Sunday in 1v1s. He was very good in one on ones. And that makes me feel pretty good about that, right? And you're not going to have to face this pass rush and a moving defense like this every week. And the fact that you can win some of your one on ones is very impressive. Jonnu Smith has been winning some one on ones. Pat Fryermuth wins those. The running backs are winning in pass pro on some of those as
Yep.
well. So um, confidence is building a little bit. It's just taken a while to see what that all is going to bring together. Um, and so let me ask you this: of kind of those big three questions, like Aaron Rodgers gelling with this system, the offensive line issues, and the wide receiver depth chart, which one is most um, in maybe not intriguing, but worrisome, I guess, to you at this stage?
I think the biggest worry would be the left tackle position in Broderick
Yeah.
Jones. I think a lot of what we've heard is that he's been getting beaten pretty easily by the likes of Alex Highsmith, which, again, you're playing one of the better pass rushers in the league. But it's year three for Broderick. He's had a injury history of like small kind of continuous injuries that have hindered his development or been an excuse for why he hasn't kind of progressed in the last few years, or the last 2 years, sorry. So I think the early reports of him struggling are slightly worrying, plus the injury as well. It might be a conditioning thing, who knows? But that is the biggest worry for me. Coming into the season, I was most intrigued to see how Jones and Fawatanu would go this year. So I think most things we've heard about Troy have been pretty good. He beat TJ Watt 2-0, I believe, the other day in their
Mm-hmm.
reps, which is awesome to hear. But I saw a report about Broderick losing 3-0 pretty convincingly to Highsmith, um, and a few other things that have been a bit negative around Broderick. So we'll see. As we said, you take everything with a grain of salt, but that is the biggest worry for me so far.
Yeah, so we'll continue to track it. We'll continue to see how this plays out, but um, I, I don't have too many strong concerns at this point outside of probably where you're talking about at left tackle there. And to me, it's more of like, can Broderick Jones be an improvement on Dan Moore Jr. because that's what you want him to be, right? If he is Dan Moore Jr. or not even quite that good, then that's a problem because this is a first round offensive tackle. This is a guy that was supposed to be an anchor piece, a building block piece for that offensive line. And so you want those guys to develop into plus starters, not just
Mm.
replacement level guys. And that's what Dan Moore Jr. was for the last 2 to 3 years. And Broderick Jones does not need to be that if the Steelers want to go further than they have in the last few years. That's just kind of how I feel about him. So let's get into some questions here from some listeners, and this is a great one From John S., who ends up making the team in the wide receiver room. Seems like all are getting good reports out of camp. Haven't heard much on Robert Woods. Is he a lock for the team? Archie, what's your thoughts on this? Who's kind of the guys you're looking at so far in the wide receiver room that are stepping up? And do you think Robert Woods is a lock for this team if young guys can make their mark?
Yeah, so I think your three guarantees are DK, Calvin Austin, and Roman Wilson. From there, you've got a few other pieces that have to fight for their spot. They're on the bubble. I think Ben Skronik's probably got a good look into making the roster just because of his special teams value as well, what he brings in the run blocking game. So he's a guy that I would expect to make the roster. Robert Woods, he started off the training camp hot from what he was saying in the interview, saying that he was going to compete with DK. We haven't heard a lot about him, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if Tomlin and co. Decide to go with him just because of that veteran leadership he would bring to the room. He's a good run blocker. Even if his receiving game has kind of dwindled a little bit, he should still be able to operate out the slot slightly and provide a bit of a safety blanket if needed. But an interesting name that I have heard that have been making a few waves is Rock Taylor,
Yeah.
the undrafted rookie. He's a bit of an athletic freak. He's been making some waves in one-on-one and team periods. He's been getting open by all accounts, just maybe not finishing off plays. So I think he'll get a good shot in preseason to potentially uproot that fifth or sixth spot on the depth chart and maybe make his mark.
It's going to be interesting to watch because I just think it's such a limited opportunity for guys in this room because excuse me, choked a little bit there. But I think that the fact that the Steelers have been working for tight ends like with
Yeah.
pretty regularly throughout training camp so far leads me to think that only 5 wide receivers are going to
Hmm.
make this roster. And you'll have some guys on the practice squad, obviously. But so let's just talk about this for a second. As far as like locks for the roster, it's DK Metcalf, it's Calvin Austin the third, and Roman Wilson, right? Those are three
Yep.
locks. That leaves me 2 spots left. And I think Ben Skoranek might be a lock for one of those spots too because of the special teams value. So that leaves me one more spot to divvy up between Robert Woods, Rock Taylor, Scotty Miller, Lance McCutcheon. Um, it's a very tight room, and somebody's going to get left off this roster that was thinking that they were going to make it or have a chance to make it. So
Yeah.
it's hard to predict right now, but I would say that if I had to make a prediction at this point, I think Robert Woods probably makes this roster because of what he provides as a blocker, veteran leadership in the room as well, and then Rock Taylor gets on the practice squad, and maybe Scotty Miller. I can't remember if Scotty Miller is eligible or not for the practice squad. Still, I'll have to check that. But
Yeah. I think with Scotty, he's definitely had glowing reports from Aaron Rodgers. Whenever I've listened into Rodgers talking in press conferences or media, he's mentioned Scotty quite a bit. So I think, yeah, he's another guy that's definitely right on that bubble that if he shows out in preseason and makes a few plays, he could certainly make that fifth spot that we're talking about there, just because of the difference he brings with he's lightning quick. He
yeah,
gets off the line fast, and he's tough, and he's got like Robert Woods playoff experience. He's won a Super Bowl, so
yeah. Yep, exactly. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Rock Taylor has a shot, I think, if he makes himself indispensable from a playmaking standpoint for a team that's going to rotate through some receivers. And but they're going to play a lot of tight ends too. So it's just a hard position group to make in Pittsburgh this year. So we'll see how it plays out. Afton Forehead, I didn't want to pass this one up. She asked, "Who do we bring for defensive line depth besides Fahoko?" Um, it was let's see here. Kyler Ball came in, I believe, yesterday um, as part of a injury release and then
yeah,
a veteran ad package here. So he's the guy who made it, other than Fahoko, as the Risa addition there. I wouldn't be surprised, given Corey Trice's injury, if they maybe bring in another defensive back here soon as well, depending on how severe that is. The fact that they haven't done so yet may be a good sign for Corey Trice. But as far as the defensive line goes, it is Ball and then Fahoko. And really, those feel like camp bodies to me. I think
Yep.
the roster, five, six, or seven guys, however they'll do the defensive line this year, um, those guys are going to be pretty much set. A guy like Fajoko has a chance at the back end of the roster if another injury occurs, probably, but this just feels
hmm
like camp body move to me.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that defensive line there's a lot of pieces up front now, and depth that the Steelers have continuity with, and you've got your headliners of the group with Cam Hayward, Keanu Ben, Derek Harmon, first round picks, and you got Wyatt Black, another rookie they've invested in. Daniel Aquile from the Patriots, he had a lot of time starting for the Patriots last year, so I'd expect him to make the roster. And then you've got Isaiah Loudermilk. There's just plenty of names to go
Yep.
around, so I think they will be pretty difficult for the likes of Hoko to make the roster.
Yeah, and Loudermilk was getting first team reps in place of Cam Hayward earlier
hmm
today. Went in three down sets. So,
Yeah,
um, that's it's just something to watch because I do think that they have like their top four or five guys probably set in stone. So,
yeah,
um, we'll see what they end up doing there. Okay, so trying to find another question here. I had a good one. Oh, Afton brings up kind of in the conversation about the offense. To me, the whole offense is just a big question mark. We have brilliant pieces, but do we have a good or better whole? Um, this plays into some of my thoughts going into last offseason, which is I think the Steelers do have the horses, but do they have the guys do they have the jockeys? Do they have the coaches to make
yeah.
this work? Especially on the offensive line. That was kind of my question: is Pat Meyer the right guy for this job? Um,
hmm
and Zach Frazier looked good. Mason McCormick looked good, but
Yeah,
some of the offensive tackles, haven't looked as great in recent years. And um, Broderick Jones had a lot of upside. So how does he work out for this team? That falls to the coaches, but it also falls to him, and we'll see how it plays out. But um, kind of that thought process of I do like the pieces. I like Aaron Rodgers. I like DK Metcalf. Um, I I in essence I like the idea of Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu, two highly drafted, high pedigree players at your tackle spots. But in practice and as a whole, how does it look together under Arthur Smith? That's going to be the big question to answer.
yeah. I think it's just the big question is how is Aaron Rodgers and his play style gonna merge with Arthur Smith? It is quite different. Rodgers plays out of the gun a lot and gets the ball away quick. Smith likes to play under center, play action, run the ball a lot, whereas we've seen Rodgers in the past check out of runs a lot. So that'll be an interesting dynamic to see how that merges. Um, and from what we understand, Arthur Smith, he does have a pretty rigid play style, but hopefully he is ready to be open to a few different ideas to kind of fit around his personnel. I think he's got the running backs now that suit him better than what Najee did as the workhorse back last year with Caleb Johnson. So that's a better scheme fit. I just think, yeah, as you said, it's all about if they can get the buy-in and the execution from a schematic standpoint. They've got better overall talent and a better ceiling this year. It's just whether they can make it all fit.
Exactly. I agree. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick break. And then when we come back, we will talk a little bit more about the Steelers roster and some of the questions that we have surrounding them. Keep your questions rolling in the chat. And if you're listening live, we're not going anywhere. But if you're listening on audio to the recorded podcast, we will be right back after this. And welcome back to the Steelers Q&A on a Sunday night here as the uh, season gets rolling here very soon. Archie is with me, and Archie, man, the next time I do a Steelers Q&A, there will have been a Steelers preseason game
Yeah.
in the books. Goodness, it is rolling right along here, and I'm excited to see how it plays out. I did want to jump into some more questions right away here. John S asks over under point 0.5 offensive snaps at fullback for Mark Robinson in the 2025 NFL regular season. Is this the Kendrick Green experiment 2.0? It's a little different, right? Because Mark Robinson played running back in college before
Yeah.
making the transition over to linebacker. Um, and I think Mark Robinson has a good shot at making this roster. We'll see how the linebacker room plays out, but the more you can do, right? And he's been good
Yeah.
on special teams. And I think it's kind of like him and Malik Harrison. Who makes this roster between him and Malik Harrison? Maybe that's the battle there. Maybe it's him and Carson Bruner. Maybe
Yeah.
that's where the real battle is. But we'll see. Um, but in your mind, do you actually see Mark Robinson? I know he tried it out on Sunday today at practice, but do we actually see him take some fullback snaps this year?
I don't know that we do see it. I mean, I think it speaks to a lot about how in high regard Mark Robinson's held in the Steelers organization, that they're trying to find ways to get him on the field. And I think he's one of those guys that you can kind of call upon based on his physicality and athleticism to do a lot of the dirty work, the special teams. And he's a good build for a fullback. But I think the fact that you've got those four tight ends, Connor Hayward's likely to play a bit of fullback. Jonnu Smith might be in there every now and again. You just got, I think, too many players to take up those potential snaps. And there was also the undrafted rookie that he was supposedly injured, but I think I saw that he was back. DJ Thomas, was it?
Oh yeah, DJ Thomas. Yep.
He's another
Thomas
guy that could
Jones. Sorry.
potentially, Thomas Jones. Yeah, he's
Yep.
another guy that could get that opportunity as well. So I think when it comes to Mark Robinson, I think I'll see Malik Harris making the roster just because of the contract he's got with the Steelers.
Yeah.
Was he 2 years, 10 million? I think that'd be pretty hard to cut just based off one training camp. So I think you're right in saying it's him versus Bruner. I think for that back end of the linebacking group.
That's going to be a fun one to watch because I think I'm pretty high on this linebacker group as a whole
Mhm.
with Peyton Wilson's second year leap, hopefully, and then I didn't think Patrick Queen was bad last year. He wasn't big time, but he wasn't bad. So he was just kind of like a middle of the pack NFL linebacker. You want him to be a little bit better than that because of what you paid him, but
Mhm.
he wasn't bad by any stretch. And I just think that another year together, him and Peyton Wilson growing together, getting Cole Holcomb back, the additions they made, Malik Harrison, and um, just some of the young guys coming into their own a little bit. I think that room looks pretty good overall. So I'm pretty high on it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Queen, you definitely saw a transition between the back end of the season and the start of the season. He came in, it was a new role being the leader of the linebacking group. Obviously, he always had, or when he was kind of being productive, he had Roquan Smith in front of him. So he was the
Yeah.
green dot for the first time properly. He was the guy in a new system. So I think honestly, it made sense that he took a bit to get used to it. But then I think in the last 6 or 7 games, even when the Steelers weren't playing at their best, he started to fly around a lot more and look like that $13 million a year player or 14, whatever that contract was.
Yep.
So I would
Right.
expect him to continue that back of season form, and you'll see more splash. Obviously, people want to see splash when you pay someone that much. And the fact he's got the athletic traits and he'll be flying around a lot more because he'll be more comfortable. I think we'll see that.
I hope so. I think so too, though. I kind of agree with you there. I think that the best is yet to come from him. So
Yeah.
I keep trying to go back up to this comment from Mark. Let's see here, show it on stream. Mark Cunningham says, so we're still an injury to DK away from deja vu. We're still going to be aggressive for a wide receiver too before the regular season starts, right? I think that this is going to happen, that there's going to be another wide receiver added. But I think that the Steelers want to see what their investments look like beforehand. I was thinking about that this week. Roman Wilson's getting a lot of run right now in training camp that he would not get if the Steelers had already traded for Romeo Dobbs or if they had brought in so and so off the street, Keenan Allen off the street or something like that. Um, so if they're going to make a splash at wide receiver, it does make sense to let the guys who need some reps get some reps while you can um, on your roster. Let's just use the Romeo Dobbs like idea as kind of a baseline for
Hmm.
this. Um, yeah, the scheme's going to be different. Him coming to from Green Bay to Pittsburgh, if that happens, right? But is it going to be that different for a guy who's been in the league 3 to 4 years now, who's kind of seen everything from a schematic standpoint,
Hmm.
and he's getting reps with his team? If you had him in Pittsburgh already, somebody's getting bumped out of taking reps there, and probably Roman Wilson to a degree. So um, I think it's a great idea to just kind of wait on this and see what happens. See if somebody cuts a guy that is like a salary dump and you can sign him cheap, um, and he's a wide receiver two type, or if not, then go trade for a guy, but after you've seen what you have in your guys. So this makes sense to me to wait, but I do think
Yeah.
that they're going to make a play at some point.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct there. I think the fact that there's not one name out there that sticks out and you think, yeah, go get this guy, based on value, and production. I think it makes sense that you give Calvin Austin and Roman Wilson all the time in the world, this preseason to go prove that they can be a 2 and 3 combo. And if they can't, that's when you go make the move. Even
Yeah,
if it takes 2 or 3 weeks into the season and you see it's not working out, you make the move faster than you did last year to go get Mike Williams, which obviously wait until the trade deadline. So
right.
I think it does make a lot of sense because they've invested a third round pick into Roman Wilson and he's been in house for 14 months now and we haven't seen a lot from him just because of the injury. So I mean, it makes sense to see him on the field. We'll see him in preseason a lot, I assume. And I think, yeah, there's not one clear name to go get that fans are clamoring for, and I think that makes sense because there's just not. You got the Packers, and we'll see who comes out there. And as we all know, when it comes down to the roster cut day, surprising names always drop out. So, yeah,
Yeah. Big G says Green Bay, Indianapolis, or New Orleans, go get a wide receiver. Those are some teams to watch for sure. Houston's going to be one as well because they've got a lot of mid-tier guys that they're going to have to cut somebody at some point. So it makes sense. I think that the Steelers should be watching that. And don't be surprised if it's still like a Gabe Davis that comes in and rounds out this
yeah,
roster, or um, one of the guys on the free agent market still. There's some options in multiple directions here. So see how it goes. Vegas TJ TJG says, who has been playing the nose tackle in the 3-4? It's actually been Keanu Benton still. And when Y.A. Black comes in, he's been playing at end, which is very
yeah,
interesting to me. That's just not how I would have profiled those two guys specifically. But when they're in 3-4, Keanu Benton kicks inside. And when they're in nickel, or their four-man fronts where they've got two defensive ends on the field and then or defensive tackles on the field, and then they've got the two edge rushers, T.J. Watt and Alex Highsmith, or whoever it may be on the outside. It's been Keanu Benton first, and then Derek Harmon working in behind him, opposite Cam Hayward. So, um, it's interesting to me, but I think that the presence of Derek Harmon specifically takes a lot of pressure off New Benton. I really believe it, and I think that he's going to have a big year because of it.
yeah. I think pressure, yeah, I understand that. But I also think it's going to push him as well in terms of he's got the young first round pick behind him who's got high pedigree, coming out of college. He's got the first round pick behind him. So I think it does take a lot of potential pressure of having to be the absolute guy behind Cam Hayward, but it should also be a bit of motivation. So we should, if Keanu Benton's up to it, see more out of him this year for it.
I hope so. I was excited about him when they drafted him, and
Yep.
was really excited about the leap I thought he was going to take this last year. It just didn't quite work out to the degree we were hoping it would, but um, I do think that there's a chance for him to be really good. So let's see here.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find this question. It's oh yeah, Mark Cunningham, is Austin banged up or did he get the day off? I didn't see whether he got an injury day or just a rest day.
Yeah.
Did
I
you
didn't
see
hear anything
that?
about an injury. No. I
Yeah,
think
I
it
think
might
it
have been
must
more to
just be a
do with
rest day.
rest because
Yeah.
it was 3 days in a row in pads, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they gave a bunch of like the star veterans the day off yesterday, and so they might have given some of like the next level vets,
Yeah.
or like the next tier down vets a day today.
Yeah.
I don't think Joey Porter Jr. practiced again. There's some questions there, but I or health questions there, but
Yeah.
overall, I think probably just a rest day there for
Hmm.
for Calvin. So
Yeah.
all right, let's see here. Okay. Um, Pickens, you big dummy. My favorite handle on here. Is Frazier's snap issues going to be an issue? I hope not. I think they've settled down over the last couple practices, but it was kind of weird early on hearing his struggles.
Yeah, I think what I did here though is that they were all out of the gun, so they were kind of just random. Whereas last year the worries were him being under center, snapping to Justin Fields. That's where the breakdown was. So I think when it's happening out of the gun, it's less of a worry. It could have just slipped out, really. It's not
Yeah.
like anything technical, like you could say when someone's under center. So I think that's not really something to worry about unless you start seeing it a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing a lot of questions here in the chat now um, about the quarterback situation. I think it started here with. I keep trying to click it, but my every time somebody chats something, it resets to the bottom. So, Biggie Bronco says, "Are you not worried at all watching other teams around the league doing the same thing that you guys have done with the quarterbacks, bringing an older quarterback to try and fill a void?" I think it's just part of team building. This question is a good one because it calls into question team building process. And if you don't have the guy on the roster that you spent an early draft pick on, I think you are just kind of bouncing through veterans and trying to figure out a stopgap solution. Even the Raiders going and trading for Geno Smith, that makes them more competitive for the next 2 years. But does that push them into the Super Bowl champion or Super Bowl contender category right now? I don't think so. I think at that contract too that they paid him, I think it more or less gives them a nice middle of the road stopgap that you can feel very comfortable with taking you to the playoffs if you have a good rest of your team around him. Um, and that's not going to break the bank too for building the rest of your roster while you try to look ahead and determine what the future looks at quarterback. So in Pittsburgh's case, Aaron Rodgers is as low risk a move as you can get because of the price tag it ended up being, and if it clicks and if it hits. You get maybe like a turn back the clock on one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history on a pretty good roster. I mean, it's not
Yeah,
Eagles loaded, but it's a pretty good roster. I put
it
this
is.
roster overall up against a lot of the rosters. Like look at the Bills roster and compare it to the Pittsburgh Steelers roster, and the Bills' offensive line is very very good, and they've got a more established guy in the backfield in James Cook. But that wide receiver room isn't any better than Pittsburgh's. That
No.
defense isn't any better than Pittsburgh's. So the difference there is Josh Allen and
Yeah.
compared to what Pittsburgh has. So if Aaron Rodgers can give you 80% of Josh Allen or something like that in kind of like a throwback year, then you're in good shape as a team and you haven't mortgaged anything for the future. And a lot of the comments I'm seeing in here as well is like, well, how do you get into range for that quarterback? The Steelers have so many options on how to get in range there. They can pull a Bills from 20 I think it was 2020 or 2018 whenever they went up to get Josh Allen where they traded before the draft to move up to like 12 from like
Yep.
25, and then they traded again to move to 7 during the draft to go get Josh Allen. So you have options, and they've got 12 picks this coming year. They've got all 7, and I think they actually have 8 picks in 2027 right now as well, including that first
Hmm.
rounder. And so there's ways to get up into that top 10. I don't think that they're going to have an issue getting where they want to get. It's just, can they get a quarterback ahead of other teams that are going to be wanting quarterbacks as well?
Yeah, I think a lot of people forget that you need to have conviction when you're selecting a future quarterback. And I think when they selected Kenny Pickett, it felt a bit rushed in terms of Colbert wanting to kind of give them the guy on his way out. So that's why in a quarterback in a poor quarterback draft, you saw them reach on Pickett, I suppose, or not reach, but take him
Yeah.
there. And I think, and that's where you see they had to cut bait 2 years into it, and then you restart the whole process again. So I think in terms of going with veteran options, it just makes sense because then you're not spending valuable resources on players that you cut 2 years later and set you back another few years. So I think
Yeah.
in terms of, and then what you said, you can go get a quarterback. If you think of how three of the top four quarterbacks in the league, being Mahomes, Allen, and Lamar Jackson, they're all they're all selected by teams. Lamar was at the back end of the first. The
Yep.
Chiefs traded up big to go get Pat Mahomes. So did Josh Allen. They weren't selected from teams sitting in the top five based off their record. So I think what people forget to understand is that you do have options to go trade up, especially if the Steelers are expecting to be somewhere between 18 and 26 again, there's options to go open up, especially in a class this year that there's so
Yeah.
much talent at that position.
I was kind of doing a mental breakdown of the quarterbacks that will be available and the number of teams that are going to try to move up there. And we actually did that with Andrew Wilbar a couple weeks ago on the Draft Dynasty podcast. So
Hmm.
if you haven't listened to that, go check that out. But when we were talking about that, we identified several teams that could be in on quarterbacks. It was like the Saints, the Browns, the Colts, the Jets, obviously some contenders too, like the Rams, like the Steelers, and then you had some maybe under the radar teams that could jump into that category if their situations didn't improve, right? Or like they were like, well, this trade didn't work out, or this signing didn't work out. Let's go ahead and get the guy in the wing while we've got our bridge quarterback, and that would be like the Raiders and like the Seahawks, right? So,
Yeah.
and remind me if I'm missing anybody there, but it's it's kind of a list of teams where some of those teams are not going to end up needing quarterbacks by the end when it's all said and done
Hmm.
because of how things go this season. And there's a good chance that there are like 6 first round eligible quarterbacks in 2026 alone that you could go get. Um, I predicted the other day, this just for fun, that Drew Aller will be the Steelers quarterback, and they'll take him at around 11, um, where they took Roethlisberger, just because there's so many guys. And we had a question in here. I kind of wanted to bring it up as a part of this, but directed at you, Archie, from Gavin Anthony. Archie, what do you think about Lenore Sellers as a prospect? I kind of think by the time it's all said and done, because Arch Manning's probably not going to be in this class, I think Sellers might end up being the number one overall pick because of the talent and like what he's going to put together in college football this year, barring an injury, is going to be probably off the charts. He's
Hmm.
probably my Heisman favorite at this point, and um, I don't know. I just think that when it's all said and done, a dual threat quarterback like that's going really early. But what do you think about Sellers? What do you think about the Steelers' chances? I just think that it's going to work out to where the Steelers can land a quarterback and feel pretty good about getting one of the top guys that you can try to build around.
Yeah, no, exactly that. Obviously, since I'm a South Carolina fan, I've watched a lot of Lenora Sellers over the last year or so. So I think he's one of those guys that has every tool in the toolbox. He's got a massive arm. He can run over you, he can run around you. Um, and I think one of the most underrated things about him is that he does have a lot of touch on his throws already. I think when you see a lot of these really toolsy quarterbacks, they're so used to just using velocity and strength to get balls through windows, but he's able to layer it across the field in between safeties and linebackers that you people kind of compare him a little bit to Jalen Milrow just because of the skill set, whereas Milrow was definitely more of just he had a deep ball and he could check it down, whereas Linares kind of sees the whole field and he's a
Yeah,
lot more efficient at it. So I think he's still really young, so you're going to see a few moments that you might scratch your head at, but he's certainly got a lot of talent. He's probably the best quarterback in terms of ability in the pocket, staying alive and keeping a play alive. You'll see edge rushers get a free shot at him because the offensive line wasn't great last year, but he just shrugs them off, resets his
yeah,
feet, eyes downfield, and he makes throws a frozen rope. So yeah, he's one of those guys that, as you said, he's probably got the best tools in this class. And if Arch isn't coming out, then well and truly could be one of those guys.
yeah. He could, and I'm excited. Excuse me. I'm excited to see how that class plays out because it could go a lot of different directions. I couldn't believe what I saw, but I think Steelers Wire, which is Sports Illustrated's like blog for the Steelers,
Okay.
they had the Steelers landing the Fernando Mendoza kid in the second round, and I'm like, there's no way in heck he's making it to the second round after you saw what he put on film last year, and I think what he's going to put on film this year, I just don't see that happening. Maybe I'm wrong because guys fizzle out all the time, but he's playing in Indiana. He's in the Big Ten now. He's going to get a jump in production. He's one of those guys that's going to be a
Yeah.
first round pick, I think, and I could see him going very high because of his Mahomesian style of play, right? Where he just kind of is a creator and can do all the arm angle type stuff. He's not robotic. He's an off-platform thrower. He's fun to watch. He's just one of those guys. So,
Yeah,
um, him and then like Klubnik, Nussmeyer. I mean, we're four quarterbacks into this discussion already, and we haven't even gotten to Drew Aller and
yeah,
um, like John Mateer and some of those other guys that are kind of like floating around in that range as well. So it's it's gonna be fine, Steeler Nation. We're
yeah.
getting ahead of ourselves because training camp's happening right now for this season, but it's part of the fun conversation about how this year's gonna play out.
Yeah, I just think the excitement of the depth in the QB class coming out this year is awesome because you have names that skyrocket throughout the season. Jaden Daniels and Joe Burrow, just to
Yeah,
name a few that were back end seventh, sixth round guys, but then win a Heisman and then they're in the top two. So I think there's just going to be so many names. And the other great thing about it is that there's so many different profile of quarterback or skill set. You've got gunslingers, you've got dual threats, you've got the game managers. So it really it's like a buffet. You can pick whatever you want
yeah,
when it comes to There's just so many different options. So, yeah, it's exciting.
it is. All right, let's do a couple generic question here as we get close to wrapping things up here. Mark Tobin says, "What does the team look like at practice so far?" So, Archie, if you had to just kind of give a general take on the team so far, what would you say they've looked like in training camp so far?
I think the first thing is the energy is a lot different with what
Yeah,
I've heard based on reports, and then even what you saw with the Pat McAfee show. There's just so much energy and positivity around the Steelers. And then from a technical standpoint, as we've kind of mentioned throughout this whole show, you take things with a grain of salt. But the defense has been dominating. The offense have looked a little bit disconnected, um, but that is to be expected in my opinion. So yeah,
yeah. I think it's been exactly what you would expect from a defensive heavy team. They have been flying all over the place on that side of the ball. They the offense wins a few here and there because they've got good talent on that side of the ball. They've got a big bodied separator in DK Metcalf, who, like, compared to George Pickens wasn't a separator. He was a high point specialist. He was a contested catch specialist. He was even really good after the catch.
mhm,
DK Metcalf is a separator. He uses his size and his speed to separate from defenders, much better than Pickens did. Now he's not a high point ball catcher. He's not a jump ball specialist. DK Metcalf. He's more of like a catch and run type guy. But he's been doing that, right? He's been blowing by guys. He's been pushing corners at the line of scrimmage and getting them off of him because he's so physical and so strong. So you have guys like that who just are, they dominate their one on ones. They make plays because they're just better than the other guys around
yeah,
them, and that's to be expected. Um, but like, if I had to just kind of sit back and give an overall take on it, I kind of agree with you. The vibe feels different because of Aaron Rodgers, I think, because of the some of the big moves that the Steelers have made this year. I think the team itself is a little more bought in because it feels like the front office maybe is a little more bought in with how they're handling
hmm
things. So as that progresses, I think the offense is going to be fine as you get into some preseason games here and they get out of the confines of Latrobe into stadiums and are playing against other teams, right? Um, there's a good vibe around this team, and the
yeah,
defense is flying around. It's going to be great. The offense will be fine. I just think that it's one of those off seasons where you can kind of just get a feeling for how this team's going to be right away. And there's some holes to
yeah,
fill. There's some issues to figure out. Left tackle, wide receiver room. How does that all play out? But overall, you got to feel pretty good about where the Steelers stand right now.
yeah. I just think the one other thing I wanted to point out was that the Steelers defense seemingly has this nastiness about them on all three levels of the field. I think in the past few seasons, obviously up front, they've been elite most of the time. And there's been a lack of maybe physicality on the back end. But this year, I think the whole group kind of has, for lack of a better term, they've got that dog in them. They're going to go make plays all around the field. And I think you'll see now teams are fearing to come and see the Steelers defense now, not just because of the pass rush or the run defense, but you're going to get laid out if you're trying to make plays in the back end as well with the likes of Jalen Ramsey and Deshaun Elliott. Um,
Yeah.
roaming around the back.
It's gonna be fun, man. It's gonna be fun. Thanks for coming on with me. I appreciate it. We had a good conversation. Thanks for all of you who tuned in and listened in, and we will be back next week with more here on the Steelers Q&A. That'll be kind of maybe looking back on a preseason game. And Archie, just as kind of a final thought here for that preseason game, since we probably won't speak again before that, but for that preseason game, what are you looking for? Maybe one thing on offense, one thing on defense, because I don't think the starters are going to play too much in that game. Probably,
No.
I would be surprised if Rodgers or Metcalf or really any of those types of guys, and any of those types of guys on the defense specifically either, would were to play in this game. But what are you looking for on Saturday?
On offense, I got two. I'd like to see Caleb Johnson get the ball a bit
Yeah,
and see what he can do against NFL level athletes. And the other would be Roman Wilson. Obviously, we've been starved of seeing him for, as we said, 14 months or so. So seeing him in the Steelers uniform properly, getting proper reps, and not just what he played 5 reps or something, 5 snaps last year. So seeing him actually out there in a preseason setting will be cool. Defensively, I'm intrigued how the rookies on the D line look, both Waya
yeah,
Black and Derek Harmon. They're the two that I'll be watching the closest, I believe, in terms of
yep.
you'll have the bigger names not playing, I assume, or not playing much at all if they do. So you should see an elevated role for those two.
I'm interested to see how deep into the bag the Steelers get in the secondary because they've got a lot of corners on the roster, but they don't have a lot of safeties on the roster. So who's
Yeah,
going to play where at the depth type spots like that? But that's my defense one outside of what you've mentioned, obviously. And then on offense, I think Will Howard, man. I want to see Will Howard for 3 quarters of this
yeah,
game. No less than 3 quarters of Will Howard in week one of the preseason here. Give me as much as I can of the young guy. So
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. All right. Thanks to all for tuning in. We'll be back next week. We appreciate you all. Appreciate you, Archie. It's been fun hanging out with you this summer. We'll have you on some more shows, and we'll keep the listeners posted on when those will be so they can get as much Archie Wilson as they want to get. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. We'll talk to you next time here on the Steelers Q&A.
Riding on cloud nine.